Welcome. This is To Our Core with Katie Murray, and this is the place where we peel back our layers to uncover who we really are at our centre, at our core. And think of it as a chat with your bestie, the one who can make you laugh until your belly hurts, who is ridiculously unfiltered, and will lovingly call you forward to help you cut through the noise and get real with yourself. Around here, nothing is off limits, and we are mixing this up with equal parts humour and heart, so let's dive right in. Before we begin today, I do want to acknowledge that I am going to be touching on topics that include chronic illness, traumatic birth and death. And I want you to take care of yourself while listening, and if you need to, please step away. This episode will always be there for you to come back to when the time feels right. So here I am, launching this podcast. And I am going to be inviting you into the stories that have shaped me and taught me as a human, a daughter, a sister, as a wife, as a mother, a coach, and a friend. And I will share the stories that are mine to share. And on occasion, I'll invite in a guest or two to share theirs. And as a coach, I am often encouraging my clients to do things that feel a bit stretchy, a bit uncomfortable, a bit unfamiliar, because I know that that's where the growth happens. And I have to be honest with you that launching this podcast feels a lot like I am in the growth zone. It is unfamiliar, it is bloody stretchy, and my mind has been trying to tell me all sorts of stories. Like, you know, the ones where it says, who are you to launch a podcast? Or what will you even talk about? Or what if you run out of things to say? Which is a complete and utter joke. For anyone that knows me knows that I love a good chat. So here's what I have been doing in the lead up to this. And this is what I also offer as support to my clients to do. And that is to acknowledge the part of my mind that is trying to keep me safe from the unfamiliar. And I thank it for looking after me. And then I take action anyway to go and do the actual thing, because confidence grows through taking action, not by spending time overthinking it or pre-planning or anticipating every worst case scenario that can. So I'm just going to do a disclaimer here. This podcast is not going to be perfect because I'm not perfect. Some episodes might look like 5 minutes long as I pop in here to share a thought that I think might support you in this crazy experience called life. And other episodes you might not be able to shut me up. And I'm not going to actually put any pressure on myself to be anything other than who I am. And some episodes might have you in fits of giggles as I turn up the dial on unfiltered. Others may see a sneaky swear word or 2 or 10 slide right in as I launch into a passionate pep talk. Or I use my humour to lighten your day. And other times you may even find that you get a little tear in your eye as I show up with nothing but heart. Because at the end of the day, my mission here is to encourage you to feel something. In a world where we often suppress our emotions while wearing a mask, in a world where there are homeless people that we walk past as though they're invisible, in a world where children are starving and violence is an everyday news story and good news just does not appear to sell, we are becoming numb. And ever since I was little, I discovered I had the ability to make people laugh. It's often through my dramatic reenactments of events that have gone by, or that I could reach someone's heart with my words, or I could create and hold space for someone to share their innermost thoughts. And I realized that I wanted to contribute to this world in a way that left people feeling better about themselves. And for this very first episode, I want to share this part of my story. A story that not many people have actually heard in its entirety. It is the story of humanness, as I encourage you to lean into yours, because my belief is that connection is fostered through being ourselves, through being unashamedly human. And this episode, I've got to be honest, it may not be filled with the giggles like I plan to deliver, no doubt sometime in future episodes. However, I do hope that it will create an opportunity for you to get to know me a little, for you to see me as I am, to show you that here on this podcast, we go beyond the surface so that others feel safe to do the same. And my story showcases, firstly, my obsession and pursuit of strength, a value that I have held very close my whole life. And I have always been known as the strong one. And when I say strong, I am not talking like in the sense of Hulk Hogan. Like, my biceps are literally the size of table tennis balls. Like, and that's being generous. When I say I'm the strong one, it's in that people know they can lean on me. The one who keeps dusting herself off, continuing on despite it all. And it has shaped who I believe I was at my core. And there is so much of this story that I absolutely love about myself. And what I've also learned is that sometimes my strength was also my weakness, even when I used it as this armor around me. And that armor, whilst often very protective, it can leave us, a lot of us, feeling like really isolated, more isolated than supported. So where do I start my story? Well, let's look at when I was 12 years old, and I distinctly remember thinking of professions that I wanted to do when I grow up. And I have to be honest, I still sometimes question whether or not I am in fact a grown-up, and I am 42. However, we digress. Like most kids, we think about and we look far into the future to dream about what we will become. And I remember at 12 knowing deep in my gut that I wanted to help people and that would somehow be through my voice. And I first thought, maybe law. I wanted to give people an opportunity to be heard no matter their circumstances. And I also did toy with being an actress. However, despite like a few stellar high school performances, that career pathway didn't quite work out for me. But what I loved about it was that through my acting, I could evoke a reaction or emotion. I could support people to feel something. And so off I tottered to uni and I went to study law, journalism and psychology. Are we seeing a bit of a theme here about wanting to communicate messages? Maybe this idea of a podcast isn't such a far-fetched idea. Anyway, I'm at uni, and while I was studying law, I realized that this career path was not going to be for me, because what I really wanted to do was meet people earlier, before their life entered potentially the judicial system, which, many of us know can be fraught with its own challenges, and it's not always met with this outcome that people would consider justice. I really wanted to advocate for the potential in everyone, to remind them of who they were at their core, because the world often tries to mold us and change us. And I wanted to remind them of the possibility that was available to them, of who they are and of their capability. And so I took a little detour from law and I entered social work, specifically with a focus on child protection, continuing that seed that had started to grow in me very early on, that was connecting me to this story of the identity being tied to being the strong one, the one that could carry a heavy load, who could protect, who could speak up for others. And I know exactly where this seed came from too. It was from the sweetest, most purest place, from a little girl that idolized her dad, because I am telling you now, my dad was the definition of resilience. He was our family's rock. He was quietly stoic and he always appeared unshakable. And he made me feel so safe. And watching him taught me that strength meant showing up, standing tall and carrying on. And he used to say with a smile on his face, "Stiff upper lip, Kate," when I was whinging about something completely pathetic. Let's be honest. I was probably whinging about the fact that my Milo wasn't hot enough. Anyway, he would say, stiff upper lip, Kate, which actually, when you think of it, is kind of a weird descriptor because who has a stiff lip? But anyway, I digress again. When you think about that saying and what it means, it is about being composed, calm, and brave. And he never complained. Like, I cannot think about one time in my life that I can think of him complaining about anything. He became my inspiration in all the best ways. And I must admit that there were plenty of times as me and my siblings, we may have given him plenty of good reasons to look to the heavens and say, give me strength. To emphasize how much strength became more than a value to me. I even have it tattooed on my foot, the word strength, in remembrance of my dad and what he taught me. And it became such a prominence in my life. It became my identity. It became who I thought I had to be. And then I saw it starting to show up in my life in patterns that weren't always helpful. So as a teenager, in grade 10, I became seriously unwell with an illness that very few doctors had ever heard of. And you know that pain you feel when you hit your funny bone? Well, that was the pain that I felt through this illness, except it was all encompassing every part of my body. And one doctor described it as though someone has turned on all of my pain receptors in my body like a light switch, and they couldn't work out how to turn them off, which, can I say, moderately terrifying to hear those words. I ended up in a wheelchair for 6 months. And at an age where independence is everything, mine was taken away. And I remember turning up to my year 10 formal in a wheelchair, only being able to stand for short periods of time. And to be honest, I felt a shadow of myself. What I learned through that experience, though, was that people respect resilience. They praise me for my courage and for my grit and for my determination. And I certainly did not want to worry anyone with my pain, so I adopted a very brave demeanour. And only my parents and those closest to me saw my agony. And as a parent myself now, I can only imagine how terrifying it was for them to see their daughter at the age of 16 completely a shell of herself. But my identity as the strong one was being reinforced. The lesson for me then was be strong. People seem to respect that. And here's my truth, is that my strength was really lonely. Strength kept me moving forward, and it also kept me from saying, fuck, this is hard. I need some help. And I found this armor of strength well and truly beginning to form around myself. And this is where I started to see the pattern. My strength was becoming less about resilience and far more about performance. The role that I had convinced myself I had to play, the identity I told myself that people expected of me. And no one actually asked me to adopt this, can I just say? And often people don't ask us to adopt these roles and these masks that we put on. And their well-intended kind words about how brave I was also reinforcing that. Strength would earn me respect. And who doesn't want that? Particularly as a young 16-year-old girl. And there was no way I was going to let the mask slip and let people see that I really didn't feel very strong at all, because what would they think of me then? And then later, I saw this pattern showing up again. In my career, that armor of strength became everything. Like, I was employed by Child Protection, and so many told me when I told them that I was going to work in Child Protection, wow, that's amazing that you can do that. I could never do that. It would break me. And so I made a mental note. I must never let this break me. I'll show them just how strong I am. The work was demanding. People came and left. In this work, you see the very best in people and you see the very worst. And I was a 21-year-old graduate straight out of uni. And I remember speaking to another social work student, And I always looked at her like she was more experienced. And when I reacted in surprise to something that she had encountered during one of her uni placements as part of her social work degree, she looked at me when I showed that surprise and said, "Don't ever show surprise to a client. You have to remain neutral at all times." And so I made a mental note. Right, okay. Don't ever show emotion. Check. Got it. And then when I got the role as a child protection worker, I remember a colleague saying to me very early in my career, "You won't last 6 months here." That comment was not meant with malice. However, at the time I took it, it was just another opportunity that I had to prove that I could hack it, that I could keep my emotions locked away, that I couldn't show any weakness, that I had to convince people of how tough I was and that no matter what, that I could cope. And it worked. On the surface, I became seen by many of my colleagues as the one who could handle the heavy cases and the scary situations, and I was promoted to team leader very early in my career, and I was known for speaking up in rooms where many fell silent. And I was also oblivious at the time to the reputation that I was creating for myself, and that was that I was intimidating, cold, and hardened. And it was absolutely something that I never ever wanted to be perceived as. Yet my desire to keep wearing the mask of strength often did make me appear emotionless. The strong one, the one who never broke, the one who never backed down in the face of fear. Inside, though, I didn't feel very strong. I felt like I was constantly just trying to prove myself. Like I couldn't let anyone see through that disguise. Because what would they think of me then? And you know what the irony of this whole story is? That I actually admired the authenticity and vulnerability and self-compassion that I saw in other people so much. Yet I would not allow myself to live in that same way. And then years later, the pattern showed up again. I encountered another experience that began to harden this armor, as I call it, of strength with the birth of my third baby. And don't get me wrong, it was the birth I dreamed of. It was 3 hours long from start to finish. It was intense, yeah, and straightforward. There was no pain relief. My baby was delivered by a student midwife. I had a healthy, beautiful baby girl, a little girl to complete our family, with 2 little brothers for her at home waiting for her, and my husband staring adoringly into the eyes of his first daughter as she lay in his arms. And everyone in the room appeared to be euphoric, including the student midwife who was celebrating her first delivery, until it wasn't. That same student midwife was left holding me in her arms as I lay semi-unconscious as I suffered a severe postpartum hemorrhage, losing 2.5 litres of blood. Every single alarm was sounding. A room full of nurses rushing around hooking up both of my arms to IVs, while my husband was ushered out of the room to sign countless forms authorising the doctors to take whatever life-saving measures they needed to in order to save my life as they rushed me into emergency surgery. They shut down the whole ward. There was a nurse stationed at every single patient's door, so they didn't have to see me. My husband said to me, "I have never seen someone look so unwell and so grey who was still alive." My husband was left holding our newborn baby, wrapped in nothing but a towel, unsure if I was going to survive. And I needed 4 blood transfusions. And through surgery, thankfully, they were able to stop the bleeding and spared me an emergency hysterectomy at the age of 32. And for a long time afterwards, I did not want to acknowledge how terrifying that experience was. I always dismissed it when people would say, "Wow, that must have been so hard," and they'd show me sympathy. I would deflect immediately and say, "It must have been so much worse for my husband to have witnessed all of that," whilst minimising my own experience. I would say, "My goodness, it must have been an awful experience for that student midwife who just delivered her first baby in the most smoothest of circumstances, for then it turned to one of the worst possible scenarios for a natural birth." And I could see it through everyone else's experience, and yet I refused to acknowledge my own experience. Because in my mind, if I did, and I admitted how frightening and traumatic that experience was for me, it would mean that I wasn't coping. And I can tell you that vulnerability clashed with my identity as the strong one in a big way. And if I wasn't strong, then who was I? 7 years ago, the pattern showed up again. I faced another challenge when I required sudden spinal surgery after a neck injury. And following this surgery, I developed debilitating vestibular migraines, like the migraines that leave you feeling like you're going to pass out, vomit, lose control of your bowels. It's a chronic illness that still I have symptoms daily and there's no cure. And once again, I put on the brave face and I just kept going. And behind the face, yeah, I've got to be honest, I was exhausted, frustrated and grieving. I was grieving for the quality of life that I'd once had. Yet you better believe it, I held the armor tight. I must be strong. That's what people expect of me. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe it was always just what I expected of myself. And I think that's the catch here. When our strengths become our identity, they can also become our limit. Strength has carried me through so much, and it has also kept me disconnected. Even where moments of connection could have been the very thing that helped me. 4 years ago, the pattern appeared again when my dad passed away. I stood up and delivered his eulogy in front of a huge audience of people who respected my father, the rock for our family. I remember my knees physically shaking as I stood there, and I remember thinking to myself, I hope no one can see my knees shaking as I stand here and deliver my father's eulogy, because they might think I'm not coping. Like, seriously, my need to be stoic was a full-blown personality on its own. And guess what? People did remark afterwards how strong and courageous I was. And yes, in that moment I was. I delivered a tribute to him with a voice that did not quiver. I did him so proud, and I honoured the incredible impact he had had on my life and on the life of so many other people. And what people didn't see was that my armor was firmly in place while I was still breaking inside. And I kept my grief so tightly contained, even as I spoke those words, delivering his eulogy, words of love for the man that taught me the definition of strength. And once again, my strength was admired by others. And so it reinforced it to me that this is who I am. And I can't let the mask slip. And so I continue to isolate myself. See, I told you, there's no surface level here. And I share these stories for a reason. All of these experiences have shaped me. And they also revealed something really important, that strength doesn't have to mean standing alone. That realization is part of what actually inspired me to step into coaching. Coaching has allowed me to expand my skills to support people more intensively and to connect more deeply than any other work I've ever done. It gives me the opportunity to walk alongside others in their challenges, and not just so that they can survive them, instead so that they can find joy and possibility and choice within them. Because here's my truth. The adversities that we face, they do not define us. We get to choose our story. The final page in our story isn't written yet. And so at any moment, we can ask ourselves, is this the story that I want to keep living? So what does strength mean to me now? Well, I've evolved a bit, and strength is still one of my highest values, and I've redefined what it means to me. Strength no longer means armoring up or pretending that I can do it all alone. Strength now means being fully me, authentic, honest, vulnerable, and gritty enough to keep going when I need to, and brave enough to ask for help or pause when I need to. And you will often find me over on Instagram very unpolished. No makeup, potentially with my newest cluster of zits on my face, which have come to visit because, hey, apparently me hitting 40 has sent a message to the zit gods that I got through the teenage years pretty unscathed from acne. So now is the time to make up for that so I don't feel like I missed out on the experience. Has anyone else hit the age of 40 and suddenly they're getting more zits than they ever got as teenagers? Anyway, I digress. You may find me over on Instagram sharing some humorous story about me making a right dick of myself, or I may even be sharing a helpful coaching strategy that might support you. It's a mixed bag. You should really check it out sometime. However, you can always rely on me for one thing, and that is that I will always keep it real, honest, and true to who I am. And in keeping it real, my definition of strength is knowing that I have survived every single hard day in my life, and so have you. And that's what connects us to our core. So how can this be meaningful or impactful for you? How can me sharing my story make a difference? Well, I'm going to invite you to reflect on your own story, and I want to leave you with 3 questions. First of all, where in your life might you be wearing armor that looks like strength, but it's actually keeping people out? Secondly, which of your strengths sometimes tips into self-protection instead of connection with others? And finally, what is one safe step that you could take this week to soften the armor? Is it asking for help? Is it opening up honestly? Is it giving yourself permission to rest? What is it for you? What is that one small step where you can loosen the grip? Because I hope you've heard loud and clear in my story that real strength isn't actually about going it alone. It's about knowing that you can stand tall and also let yourself be supported at the same time. So there we have it, a piece of my story. And I want to thank you for being here with me for this very first episode of To Our Core. Thank you for holding this space for me to share my experience of how my definition and value of strength has evolved throughout my life. I am still learning, I am still growing, and I am still reflecting in areas of my life that I want to strengthen. Ironically, there's that word again, strengthen, and give focus to. And I hope that thirst to keep growing never stops. And I'll also continue to do it in the only way that I know how, by being human. And if me sharing my story has resonated with you, I would love for you to share it with a friend who might need to hear it as well. I'd love you to give this brand new podcast a cheeky 5-star rating to help this message reach so many, many more people. Or you could pop over to Instagram and connect with me there. I would love to know what landed for you from this episode. And next episode, we're actually going to dive into a conversation with a woman who first gave me the opportunity to step into the role as a coach. A woman who is now a very dear friend and who is also on her own journey of self-discovery and redefining her identity. So until then, I invite you to keep living, like really living, loving and laughing all the way to your core. Go make life freaking great. And if you need support, if you want support around this, please go to the show notes to find out more about how I can support you. And until then, I'm going to meet you back here soon with more truth, more laughter, and a whole lot more heart.